getting to the point now that it is still dark for quite a while after I wake up. But at least it's not horrifically freezing yet. So far the insulation we put in the studio seems to be really paying off. Today I am just going to be getting stuff done in the studio. Some tricky stuff that requires a lot of focus, and also some really fun stuff like cooking up some fire.
To maintain a decent mental health as it gets darker and heads to winter, I have a strong daily routine, starting with yoga in my brother's studio, and he's just released a studio tour if you guys want to go and check that out. After we've done some yoga, we go straight into a Wim Hof guided breathing meditation.
5 more. Let's give it all we got.
It's pretty intense. I'll link this video down in the description if you guys want to give it a go. It's super powerful.
And on the exhale, stop. 1.5 minute breath hold from now on.
Then I make sure that everything is nice and tidy in the studio and get on with some singing practice. Here's the chipmunk version of me practicing at speed. I'll also attach a Spotify link to an account called Jacob's Vocal Academy, which I discovered recently. It's a brilliant resource just for getting it done. I also have this blue light that's actually just a YouTube light that I got, but it changes color, and so by making it blue and turning it on full power, I just put it beside me when I'm working, and it does all sorts of great things for my brain and my circadian rhythms, and it also just feels good.
Oh yeah, of course. Hey everybody, it's Kobe McCool and welcome to this video. It's been awesome to see the channel growing recently, and hello to all the new subscribers. If you're new to this channel, it's great to have you here, and I really appreciate all of you liking, subscribing, sharing, and commenting. It's truly epic. You guys are the best. The goal today is to use a couple more samples than I usually do. I often tend to avoid using samples because I want to push my ability to create decent sounds myself, but I also know that there's a lot of benefit to using samples. There's no right or wrong answer, but you do get different outcomes. I can go into more detail in the future about how and why you might use a sample and why you might not. I was messing around with some samples trying to put some stuff together. My computer can't handle me doing all of this, but my laptop really does seem to struggle with recording my screen and running FL Studio at the same time. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. So I'm going to give you guys a little bit of a demo of what I made. This one has 3 adjectives that spring to mind: chunky, smooth, and juicy. And then I'm going to dive in to a breakdown.
I know you're something I won't forget, even if I don't see you again.
Nice. So best place to start with this one is where I started with it, which is this loop here. Here's the original sample. So I just cut it up and cut out some of the chords that I didn't want to include this time round, and then added a little bit of EQ and then sent it to some reverb, and then automated that reverb so that it would come up and down whenever I wanted it to. By separating the reverbs out, it gave me a lot more control, but when you have separate reverbs from instruments in particular, you have to be really careful to manage the frequencies, particularly in the low end, because even if you've EQ'd your instrument but you haven't EQ'd the reverb for that instrument, then it could still be making a massive amount of wash and messing up your mix. I felt really inspired when I heard that loop, and I had a vision in my mind of what I thought I would want it to do, and it's more or less what I ended up with, but I was open for some surprises. The next thing I added on top of it was just the piano chords. So all I did was printed out the MIDI chords within the soft piano, the Spitfire audio one, which is a free one. And always check the descriptions of my videos because I put in the links to lots of the free VSTs and the kit that I use. But if you can't find something, then just send me a message on Instagram. I printed out the MIDI into a waveform, which then meant that I could reverse the waveforms into each other. And once again, I did quite a lot of EQ here. Because this piano sound originally is actually very muted and quite soft. I actually wanted it to be more bright and not to be over consuming in the low end because I would be adding in the bass. So here's the most significant EQ that I have. I completely pushed it way out of whack. I often find when you're EQing very sensitive things like vocals, you want to be pretty careful with the EQ curves that you go for, but if you're EQing things like instruments, the visual is there to help, but don't let that be the reason that it actually prevents you from getting the sound that you could get. Because you think it looks too crazy. Just because it looks crazy doesn't mean that it sounds bad. So if I take this EQ off, it just has a different characteristic which doesn't fit so well with the energy that I wanted this to have. The next element I added in was just this heavy sub that I made in Serum. So I just made the cutoff oscillate a little bit. I just had several voices of unison to give it that width and then detuned them ever so slightly. Then added a little bit of noise and a little bit of distortion just to try and make it nice and thick and sit well with everything else. Then onto the drums. I kept the drums really simple and I also decided to allow myself to use a drum loop because usually I try and piece them all together, but this time I just wanted to see what would happen if I used different grooves. And I find that doing that can help push you out of your comfort zone because you end up with sounds that you don't usually go for. What I've discovered is that drum sounds are so context dependent. You could listen to a kick and a snare on their own and just think, wow, those couldn't work with anything. But then when you pair them together with other similar sounds and some nice instruments, and you make them loud enough with some compression and decent mixing, it can actually sound ace. With these drums, it really helped that they all had a similar texture, this kind of breathy airiness. The kick has a decent low end, but it also has this breathiness up at the top, which I actually pushed up with an EQ curve just to make it even more present. Now this loop in itself sounds like an entire drum loop, but it's been filtered so that you don't have an overpowering kick and snare. So actually it just ends up complementing everything really nicely. And then I just have another shaker loop that pairs with that. And then just a lovely rim shot snare. Initially, I thought that snare wasn't going to work, but then when I left it and put all the other instruments and elements in, I was pleasantly surprised to see that I actually really liked it. I just have one basic kick pattern so that it's not too overpowering, and then I have one other slightly more complex and exciting kick pattern. Then one of the most important aspects of all of it was sidechaining the kick and the snare, and the sidechain compression does so much to carry the groove and the feel of this. So I sidechained the kick to the bass, the instruments, the instrument effects, the piano, and the vocal effect. And then I put a sidechain on each individually. I didn't just want one massive sidechain that would duck everything. I wanted to be able to control it. And yes, it takes a little bit longer, but I would say that it's definitely worth it because you get a much more tailored fitting sound. Then I just quickly threw some melodies that came to my head on with the vocals, just played around chopping them up, pushing them up different octaves and adding different levels of reverb onto them. If I were to take this to a final song, there's loads more that I could build upon with the vocals and with the instrumental in general. But the aim here was to experiment with different styles, use some samples, and try a couple different mixing ideas. And overall, I'm very pleased with that. If you guys have any questions about it or would like me to talk about anything else in more detail in future videos, then please do just leave a comment down below or send me a message on my Instagram. I'd love to hear from you. And yeah, that was that. I really hope you guys enjoyed this video and I can't wait to share the next one with you, and you can probably click on one of those right now, but until then, bye.